Sitting on his throne, in front of a beautiful elf girl, was the future demon lord. After a brief silence, the girl then asks how he intends to kill her, but he doesn't intend to kill her because she is the woman he loves. To understand this, we need to go back one day. In the middle of the forest, there were two people. The woman asked the man to control himself, but he was never who she thought he was. And as he gets closer, she slaps him in the face and soon realizes this is not the person she knew. He reveals that he is a mage and intends to rip off her face, as the face of a virgin is worth a lot. He would have done it if it weren't for the man who arrives just in time, grabs him by the head, and asks how they dare cause such a commotion in his garden, and that he was almost asleep when they woke him up. The man he is holding soon realizes who that person is and says that they are both mages, that he could share his research if he is let go. But the man, already knowing what the research is about, just kills him right there. Watching this, the girl faints, and he soon thinks that she will end up traumatized by this, and then he conjures a reversal magic circle. In this circle, the man's blood returns to him, and the woman's clothes are mended. However, this does not revive people. He then notices that the girl has a church cross medallion, and remembers that they are natural enemies of mages. But without caring about that, he was just going to send her to the city. However, another mage appears and interrupts his magic circle. The mage in question is named Barbaros, and he asks what Zagan, our protagonist, was doing. He says he was just punishing a criminal who invaded his garden. But hearing Zagan call someone a criminal makes Barbaros laugh. Looking at the girl on the ground, Barbaros says she has a lot of magical power and asks if he is going to use her as a sacrifice. But Zagan quickly says that this kind of magic is not for him, and then sends the girl somewhere else. Barbaros says he could have given her to him, but Zagan says not to abduct people in his territory, or he will be seen as a criminal. After finishing the conversation, Zagan says he is going to sleep, but Barbaros says he has interesting news. One of the demon lords has died. There are 13 mages with this title, and one died a few days ago. And then he says that a grand auction will be held to sell his legacy, and so they head to the auction city. On the way, Barbaros tries to borrow money from Zagan, since he was the one who talked about the auction. But Zagan quickly says to look for someone else if that's the case. Barbaros then says that Zagan could choose some women, but in response to that, he thinks they would just bother him. And then they arrive at the auction. Already seated, Barbaros says that there are other candidates to become a demon lord just like the two of them. And then comes the last item of the auction, the most valuable of all, something that was still to be delivered to the former demon lord, a legendary species, an elf. And as soon as Zagan sees her, he is amazed. And before the bidding even starts, Zagan says he will pay $1 million for her, which draws everyone's attention, and so she is sold to Zagan. Barbaros says that even though she is an elf, that's a lot. However, Zagan heard nothing. He just wonders why his chest was pounding so much. She is adorable. He wants to help her, wants to see her smile, wants to touch her skin, and then he tells Barbaros that he has finally found what he desires. And Barbaros asks what kind of magic he intends to use on her, but Zagan just smiles and walks up to her. Approaching her, he simply wonders how he should talk to her and if she is okay. However, he gives off a different impression from what he is thinking, and then he asks what is around her neck. It is a collar to seal her magical powers. She also says that even they don't know how to remove it. Then Zagan asks if she is conscious, and the presenter says yes, that she has been kept in her natural state since her capture. Zagan says he will believe it, as he would be quite annoyed if she couldn't speak. However, he only says this because he wants to talk to her, but it is understood as if he wants to do terrible things. And then we return to the moment from the beginning, with her asking how he intends to kill her. She says she wants to know so she can prepare herself. But he says he doesn't plan to kill her, and it would be a problem if she died. However, she understands that he doesn't want to kill her easily. Trying to change the subject, he introduces himself, saying he is a mage but has no interest in torture. She apologizes for the late introduction and says her name is Neferia and she has no surname. He thinks it's a beautiful name. She says if her name is difficult to pronounce, he can just call her Nefi. Zagan then asks if it is normal for elves not to have family names, but she says no. It is like this with her because she is a cursed child. Nefi asks the reason for his question, and she understands that he is checking the material, so she shows her lower parts and says she is a virgin. Zagan gets completely embarrassed because that wasn't what he wanted to know, and then he explains that he doesn't plan to use her as an experiment. In response, Nefi asks why he bought her then, but since he bought her because he fell in love at first sight, he simply says that she doesn't need to know. He then stands up and says she needs to choose a room before anything else, but she understands that he meant to choose a place to die, Zagan again says he doesn't plan to kill her, but she says she doesn't understand, and asks if she will be killed regardless of how he uses her. And now, literally, he says he bought her because he needs her. So he wants her to stop talking about dying. Still confused, she asks if he needs her, and he confirms that yes, he needs her and wants her to live for him. And so begins their story of living together. After that, Zagan takes her to the room area and asks if it can be somewhere upstairs. She misunderstands and says it can be by the neck or the wrist, it's all okay. Hearing that she misunderstood, he thinks she should have more love for life. And then they proceed upstairs. But while climbing the stairs, she slips and almost falls. But Zagan caught her in a stylish manner. Afterwards, he asks her to be more careful, and now holds her hand on the way, something he can't even believe he ended up doing. Arriving at what would be her room, he opened the door and forgot that there was a guillotine there. He quickly closes the door, but she is already discouraged again and tells him to do whatever he wants. But he says it was a misunderstanding, and that it was a trap for intruders. Making up an excuse, he says it was useless and casts a spell that completely blows up the guillotine. While he is proud of having eliminated the source of her fear, she is terrified, as it was the first time she had seen such devastating magic. Neffy then runs to the window, starts looking at the moon, and stretches her hand towards it. Seeing that, he asks if she likes the moon, but she says she doesn't know. Zagan then extends his hand like her and says that he also cannot touch it. Neffy looks back at the sky and then asks to stay in this room. He asks if she is sure, and she says yes, because this was a room prepared by him. Zagan agrees and she thanks him. But this touches him, as it had been a while since he had been thanked for anything, and she then says that it has also been a while since she has thanked anyone. So, they spend a little time looking at the moon and then return to the throne room. The day dawned, and he couldn't sleep, as, due to the state of her room, Neffy had to sleep next to the throne. Giving up on sleeping, he goes out to eat something. After some time, she wakes up and then he arrives. She says good morning and he is surprised. But then he wonders how he should respond, since he has never received a good morning before, and since he doesn't know how to respond, he just hands her the food, feeling depreciated for not even being able to greet her. While eating, he wonders when he became so incapable. Neffy then asks if he is eating the same food as her. He asks what the problem is, but she just says it is an honor to eat the same as him. And then he quickly notices and asks if it is cheap food. Neffy responds that yes, this is the food given to slaves. In other words, it is not a meal but animal feed. She looks at him, and he wonders what she is thinking. However, she soon goes back to eating and remembers that this was what he always ate since he was a child, and he wonders what a normal human meal would be. Hearing this, she is shocked and asks if she should prepare something to eat. Zagan is startled and asks if she knows how to cook, to which she responds that she learned by watching, but at this moment, he is just happy to be able to eat a homemade meal from Neffy. And then he decides, saying they will go to the city to do some shopping. But when it comes time to pay for the transportation, he remembers that he spent almost everything buying Neffy. And as an excuse, he says they should take a walk there. On the way, he now thinks of a way to get money, wondering if he should have taken the money and belongings from the coachman before. But looking at Neffy, he immediately thinks he can't do that in front of her. Neffy hears a noise and quickly realizes they are bandits. She warns Zagan, but he doesn't care much, as they are just common bandits. However, he sees that Neffy is trembling. Seeing this must bring trauma to her, and as if to reassure her, Zagan casts a thunderbolt and quickly takes out one of the bandits. After that, he says they are nothing but trash. Noticing the presence of a mage, the bandits are frightened but soon attack him. Zagan catches the weapon and breaks it as if it were nothing, and with just one finger, he throws the man away. Having done this, he tells Neffy to stay behind him, and then a mage from the group of bandits appears and starts to invoke a magic circle. But what he didn't know was that Zagan could take his magic and use it to turn him into ashes. He then calls the other bandits to come at him, but terrified, they give up. And when he turns to look at Neffy, she is startled, and he wonders if he messed up again. He did all this to show that the bandits are nothing, that she doesn't need to be afraid, and he tells her that. But Neffy says the bandits didn't seem that harmless. The way she speaks makes the men laugh, and then they approach Zagan, saying that he is incredible and that it's a surprise to find a good mage. The carriage driver invites him to come along as a bodyguard, saying he will pay him for it. Zagan is even surprised because he didn't know he could make money by taking down bandits. He then reveals that he has taken down bandits before, but this is the first time he has been thanked, and he quickly thinks that maybe they are not afraid of him because he is with Neffy. Already on the way, in the carriage, Neffy asks why he saved those people. He quickly remembers that he did it only because he wanted to show Neffy that she doesn't need to fear bandits. and he notes that this might be his chance to win her affection. But then he says he just wanted to put those conceited trash in their place, thus ruining his chance of gaining her affection. Already in the city, Zagan wonders what he should buy besides ingredients and food, such as what a girl's needs are. Asking Neffy about it, she simply says that even rags would satisfy her. This is because she doesn't even know what will happen the next day. And noticing that she was walking somewhat unsteadily, he decides to take her to a clothing store. Entering the place, Zagan is immediately greeted with a forced smile, realizing that he is not welcome, but ignoring that, he simply asks the clerk to choose something appropriate for Neffy. She is enchanted by Neffy's appearance and also notices the thing on her neck, but without questions, she says she will take care of Neffy. Zagan noticed that the thing on her neck is drawing a lot of attention, but remembers that it is to prevent her from escaping, and then the clerk returns and reveals Neffy's clothes. Zagan is obviously shocked looking at that, but says that he asked for appropriate clothes. However, the clerk said she thought that was what he wanted. Unable to resist, he takes a peek, but, embarrassed, Neffy asks him not to look, and quickly asks for her to change into normal everyday clothes. And now she was dressed more like a maid, and the clothes have magic to relieve fatigue when working a lot while standing, and asking if she liked it, Neffy once again responds in an uninterested manner. This makes Zagan say that if it's like that, she will wear the previous outfit. But Neffy says she wants this one now, and then they leave. But before that, the clerk comes close to Neffy and asks if she isn't happy with a master who values her. Thus, realizing that she hadn't noticed that before, Zagan then calls her to go to another store. Upon arriving there, he quickly asks the man to check Neffy's collar and see if he knows how to remove it. Noticing that Neffy is confused, he quickly explains that it is so she won't be mistaken for property anymore, that she doesn't need such a thing, and after looking at the collar, the guy quickly says that it is beyond his capacity. And he whispers to Zagan that trying to remove it by force might end up activating traps on her neck and killing her, and he soon reflects on this, as even the staff didn't have the key. When he goes to pay the man says it's not necessary and that he would never charge him, because he was the one who saved his life. This happened a year ago, and he was saved during one of the times Zagan dealt with the bandits. At the time, they got scared and fled in panic, and now he apologizes and thanks him for that. Zagan asks the man to forget it, as he himself doesn't even remember. However, the man says he will never forget. Finished there, they leave. And now Zagan wonders why everyone is being so friendly, and that it's frightening. He concludes it's because he brought Neffy along. Watching them leave, the man from before remembers how Zagan seemed before and how he looks now. They are completely different auras. After walking for a while, they are now having dinner. And suddenly, Neffy asks if he plans to remove that collar. He says yes, and she asks if he doesn't fear that she might end up escaping once it's removed. In his thoughts, he indeed has this concern because, unlike him, Neffy has no reason to endure him. But when he was about to say something nice, he messes up again and says not to get her hopes up because he can't remove the collar for now. What he meant to say was that he would remove the collar even if she ran away. In the end, it seems she understood. After that, there's silence, and Zagan just wonders if there is a grimoire on how to talk to a woman. Noticing that she still hasn't touched the food, he asks if she doesn't know how to use a fork and knife, but she reveals that, in fact, this is her first time eating this way. Even in her family, she was treated as a curse. Thus, Zagan finally understands. He had been in the same situation as her, weak, homeless, and without hope in the world. And then he tells Neffy that there is no one there for her to hold back for, and that this food is better than the dried meat they had in the morning. She thanks him and picks up the fork to get the tomato but fails miserably. This leaves her extremely embarrassed, but she soon finds a spoon and manages to eat. He asks what she thinks of it, and she replies that it's delicious, which makes him happy. When he tries to pick up the tomato, he fails as well. But he doesn't give up, tries several times, and still doesn't succeed, until Neffy takes it with her spoon and offers it to him. Zagan accepts, and both are embarrassed. Neffy then says that he has never given her an order, and that she wants to be useful. She asks if he would allow that. He says it's fine if that's what she desires, and thus their bond strengthens a bit more. Taking advantage of the situation, Zagan offers her a tomato in her mouth as well, and she accepts. But in this cute moment, they forgot they were in a public area, and they leave the place in a hurry. Today, a reciprocal relationship between master and servant was formed between them. Meanwhile, in another place, the girl who was saved at the beginning was now present. The priest notices she is downcast and asks what happened. She reports that she lost 4 sacred knights in the last mission, as there was an intruder among their ranks, and she thinks that she only managed to survive because Zagan saved her. A man with a cruel gaze, but full of loneliness, But the priest then informs her that the mission is not over, and that they found the true culprit. That Zagan is the real culprit. But she immediately says there must be a mistake. The priest says that even if he's not involved in this case, he is still someone that needs to be eliminated. She is hesitant, but then requests that this task be hers, as the Maiden of the Sacred Sword and Captain of the Sacred Knights. The next day, Zagan ends up having a nightmare about his past, when he was captured by a mage and marked in some way, but then he is awakened by Nephi. She informs him that breakfast is ready and asks if he would like to have it now. He asks if she was waiting there until he woke up, and she responds that she was observing his face. Leaving the throne, he calls her and wishes her good morning, and she says the same. This time he managed to greet her properly. Arriving at the dining room, he is surprised because it was a complete mess before, and he notices that there are even breads on the table. In that moment, he asks if they bought bread the night before, but Nephi says no because she prepared it, and he praises her, saying that this is one of the most beautiful breads he has ever seen. Nephi tries to disguise her happiness, but her ears are wagging like a dog's tail. Zagan asks if she has eaten already, but she says no, so he invites her to eat together. However, she informs that she only made a portion for Zagan. He asks if she didn't intend to eat, but she says she just forgot to make for herself. Hearing this, he invites her to share, and that she should sit. However, she also didn't prepare a chair for herself, so he tells her to sit on his lap. It takes her a moment to understand, but they both end up embarrassed. Nephi then says she would never do something so indelicate, but he says it's okay. But inside, he just wonders why he insisted so much. With no escape, Nephi sits, and he is perplexed that she actually did that. But not stopping there, Zagan now offers food to her mouth. She says it's mean, and he agrees. So he warns her to make food for herself next time too. But as an act of revenge, she also offers food to his mouth. He now reflects that maybe he should do that more often, and they stay like that until they finish the meal. Sometime later, Zagan was in the library. Nephi arrives and asks if he was researching, and Zagan asks if she understands those symbols, and if they are different from elven magic. However, Nephi says she doesn't know, because she can't use magic. But he finds that strange, since she has a huge amount of mana, and he begins to explain the symbols to her, informing that the more symbols a magic circle has, the stronger it will be. And he summons a mini lightning as a demonstration, saying that anyone could do that, just need to put mana. She then remembers that he had put circles only outside, and asks if it would be possible to put them inside. He likes her observation, and explains that it is possible, but also impossible. And he says that if someone were able to do that, that person would be, in theory, the strongest mage of all. Nephi says she understood the logic, and asks if anyone could use magic, as long as they understand its construction. Zagan soon realizes that she has a great sense for magic, and answers yes to her question. He then tells her that for a mage, research is everything, and that many put traps and tricks in places she should be careful. However, he was joking about her being careful, and says he has already made sure that nothing will be activated by her, which makes her call him evil. Zagan notices that she seemed happy, and she asks how he knows that, but he doesn't reveal that it's because of her ears. That said, she explains that she's happy because he's talking to her so naturally, and he soon remembers that he always talked to her very directly and to the point, but explains that when it comes to magic, he gets excited. Hearing this, Nephi asks to ask a question, and she asks what he wants after achieving his goal. This makes him pensive, and noticing this, she apologizes for the question. However, he soon says that he never really thought about it, and that maybe he wants to live? So he tells Nephi that when he was a boy, he used to steal to survive, but still, he liked that life. Until one day he was captured by a mage who used children in his rituals, but that he managed to turn the tables. And so he realized he needed to get stronger. And he says that if he were to want something, it would be eternal youth and longevity. Downcast, Nephi says she will never be able to be strong like that, but when Zagan approaches to say something, someone invades his garden. He warns Nephi that he has guests, and he will greet them, and he asks her to prepare dinner, but only for the two of them. After all, the guests won't be long. Outside, they discuss whether it's a magic barrier, then the Holy Knight breaks it, and Zagan soon appears to greet them. She greets him, but he doesn't remember her. The captain of the Holy Knights. Only after observing a bit, does Zagan remember who that girl was. However, when she tries to talk to Zagan, he says he's busy and casts a spell, which is defended by one of the knights. They ask to take care of him alone, but Zagan just asks them to leave soon. The first one advances towards him with a shield and axe, but he just puts magic on his fist and strikes the knight, throwing him away. Thus, he asks once again for them to leave. However, another night advances, even with the captain telling him to stop. But with just a finger, Zagan breaks his sword and flicks him on the forehead. With the man on the ground, he steps on his face and says he'll crush his head if he does anything, and that he never forgot the sound of a skull cracking. And when the captain was about to move, he tells her not to do anything. Understanding the message, she drops her sword, but asks why he mocks those he defeats. In response, he says it's to instill fear. If he kills them, they'll just be numbers to their superiors. But she says he's lying, and that he doesn't do it for self-preservation, and that there's a bigger reason behind it. He gets a little agitated with this, because the real reason is that he doesn't want to scare Neffy by leaving their bodies there. However, thinking she hit the nail on the head, she picks up her sword again and introduces herself as Chastel. So, she advances to attack. And because her weapon is one of the 12 holy swords, responsible for defeating the Demon King, she even manages to break through his defense. And with him just dodging her attacks, she asks if she's not worthy of being his opponent. To this question, he simply says he's not in favor of hitting a woman. However, the real reason is that he's become incapable of it, as she seems to be the same age as Neffy. Unsettled by this, she asks why someone like him would soil themselves with magic. But he simply asks if that's so bad. Furious, she says that it's evil used to oppress people. But he also questions her power, because they're unilaterally killing weaker mages. She attacks him again, and he traps her sword in the ground. And then he says he doesn't intend to justify himself, because people who live off others by stepping on them can't preach justice. This hits her hard, but she soon attacks him again. This time he holds the sword with his hands, just not expecting the sword to have enough force to throw him away into a tree. The sword glowed in a way that burned his hand and diminished his healing. She then launched another attack, which soon made him consider really having to kill her right there. However, she whispers in his ear to pretend he's dead. That, or the church won't give up on him until he's dead. He says he didn't expect something like that from a holy knight, but she says he didn't even kill one of her subordinates, and that there's affection in his eyes. And most importantly, she'll never forget that he saved her life. But then Neffy approaches, and Zagan tells her to stay away. However, one of the knights sees her and throws a spear in her direction, thinking she was an ally of the mage. Quickly, Zagan jumps in front of her and is hit in the hand while protecting her. And seeing her master wounded awakens an immense fury in Neffy, who now wants to kill the one who hurt him. Neffy suddenly begins to manipulate the forest around and directs it towards the man who injured her master. She captures him and was about to kill him right there, but Zagan stops her and says it's okay. She pauses, and now Zagan observes what she did. Wondering if this is her power, already inside the castle, she now wraps her injured hand. Zagan then comments that he thought she couldn't use magic. However, she says that it's not magic. He asks what it is then, but then says that, actually, it's none of his business. But then realizes that saying that might sound like he doesn't care, so he corrects himself and says that she is Neffy and nothing more, regardless of the type of power she possesses. Zagan realizes that saying this had an effect, and Neffy thanks him. And then he asked if she was scared. She is somewhat confused by the question and asks if he doesn't find her strange after that. Zagan just asks why he would think that, and she gets nervous. He says he just found it intriguing, since he had never seen it before. Neffy then begins to explain that this power is called mysticism. Zagan notes that he has heard of it before and begins to remember that this is not a magical technique, but something that can interfere with anything. He asks if this is a power that all elves possess, but Neffy says no. And she says she has it because she is a cursed person. That, apparently, this is a power no one should have. When her village was attacked by humans, she was ordered to use it to protect them, but with the excuse that she should repay for being allowed to live. When they said that, it was like something broke inside her head. She didn't help them and let herself be captured, as she watched her people being massacred because even dead, they are still useful. And she says that watching that made her feel good, because they deserved it. She loved seeing them cursing while she just watched them die. After that, she realized what she had done, that she was someone who could easily laugh watching others die. And then she starts apologizing to Zagan and saying that he must hate her now. However, he just asks why he would do that. Seeing that she is confused, he explains that, in her place, he would have ended both sides, village and invaders. And he adds, saying that this power is neither good nor bad. Even so, she says she did something unforgivable. And he asks, unforgivable to whom? And says that, if she has power, she must live intensely. Acting otherwise would be blasphemy to the weak who perished. Neffy asks if it's really okay for her to have power. And Zagan responds with another question. Is it bad to have power? To seek strength? Similarly, they say he is a bad person. And he starts telling that one day he saved a young woman. He told this young woman that it was natural for the weak to die, and that she needed to get stronger if she didn't want to end up like them. A spoiled young woman who would normally be trampled. He regretted saving her, because not wanting to be like those pathetic people, he became strong. Someone who was abandoned by his own parents could never be helped by others. And that's why he fought desperately to become strong. In the end, he was considered superior, but there was nothing left. That's Zagan. Unsettled by Nefi being sad, he told her that. Approaching her, he asks her not to look so sad, and that he needs her. She asks if she can really stay there, and he says he can't imagine a life without Nefi. That said, she bursts into tears and Zagan comforts her. As night falls, she was ashamed for showing this embarrassing side. But he says it's okay. Looking at her hand that had been injured, he now notices that it was perfectly fine. And he asks if she healed him. She says she probably did, and he remembers it must have been when he touched her before. Thus, he thanks her. But this surprises her because somehow that was the first time he thanked her, and he didn't even realize he hadn't done that before. However, she says it's okay because she belongs to him. Bedtime arrives, and Zagan hears footsteps. Nefi appears and asks to sleep with him. He takes a moment to understand, but soon gets it. He asks if she knows what she's saying, but she says yes, and says there's only one bed in the castle, so then he snapped back to reality. She says he always sleeps on the throne, and that maybe it would be easier to rest if they were lying together. In other words, she's simply inviting him to sleep together. He says he's grateful for her consideration, but he can't leave that area of the throne because he needs to stay alert in case something happens. She says she thought it would be like that, so she sits on the floor and tells him to use her lap, and even starts waving her arms calling him. How cute. My God. He accepts the invitation, and she asks how he's doing. Zagan timidly says it's not bad. Inside, he thinks he doesn't even know where to look, and that it's very good. But then he asks the reason for this sudden invitation. Nefi says he allowed her to stay there, even after finding out about her power. So, she wanted to show her gratitude. Zagan says she didn't need to do that and, touching her face, he asks if she wouldn't like to learn magic, and explains that when he saw her using her power, she seemed to have no control, and that even though there are guarantees that he will help her control it, she will at least be able to protect herself. Nefi asks if it's really possible for her, and Zagan replies that she might even end up better than him. Nefi asks if it would be useful for him, but Zagan says he is already being useful. He asks if she would be able to protect him, but he says she already has protected him. And then she accepts. She wants to learn magic. So, from now on, Zagan says she is his apprentice. Nefi calls him and comments on what he had said in the afternoon about not understanding the feelings of the weak. He says he really said that. She says he said it as if it were nothing, however, it's very difficult. He asks why she thinks that. Nefi replies that she doesn't know very well, but that, at that moment, he seemed very sad. And pulling him into her arms, she says he's not bad, that even though he doesn't mention it, she will never forget his kindness. And so, he sleeps. A few hours later, already in the afternoon, Barbaros goes to visit Zagan. He says he heard that Zagan had been attacked by knights, but that he isn't even hurt. Zagan says they were too weak. Nefi then serves a drink to Barbaros, and seeing her, he gets a fright. He asks if she's the elf from before, and Zagan says yes. Barbaros says he thought Zagan would use her as a sacrifice, but instead, he made her his servant. However, Zagan corrects him and says she's actually his apprentice. And again, he's startled. Zagan says he has spells that cannot be cast, and in those cases, Nefi will be very useful. Hearing this, Barbaros connects the show in front of the castle to her power, and he asks Zagan if he's really aiming for the Demon King's throne. In his head, Zagan reflects on it. Even without the Demon King's throne, he wonders if he would be able to prevent other mages from getting their hands on Nefi. But to Barbaros, he asks if there's any reason not to. Seeing how well they're getting along, Barbaros asks if he happens to like her, but Zagan just asks if there's any harm in liking his apprentice. He says that, then, even Zagan has a human side within him. After the conversation ends, Barbaros leaves. Zagan then wonders why he came there. Nefi asks if he's her friend, but Zagan says he's definitely not. But Nefi says he seemed to be enjoying himself. But putting that aside, he calls her to start fixing the barrier and teaching her the basics. so she follows him. In the following days, Nefi learned the basics of magic. She reached a point where she could use magic even if the collar was removed, but controlling mysticism still remained difficult. And without even realizing it, a month had passed since he bought Nefi. One day, while Zagan was in his garden, a bird-like creature appeared from the sky and handed him a letter, an invitation from the 12 demon kings. So he went to the specified location, the city of Kinoids, where, underground, lie the ruins of the deceased demon king Markoisia's castle. In this place, all 12 demon kings are gathered in front of him, and Zagan wonders what they want. Just one of them calling Zagan is enough to send shivers down his spine. Zagan compares the pressure he's feeling to that of a toad threatened by a snake. However, he corrects himself, because it feels more like that toad has already been swallowed by it. Wanting to leave soon, Zagan asks if they called him just to observe him. Hearing this, they find him bold, but then they get straight to the point. They say they summoned him there because they want him as one of the demon kings. With that said, they invoke the seal of the former demon king. To become one of them, Zagan must unite with this title. He soon realizes that this is no ordinary seal, and it holds an absurd amount of mana. He thought being a demon king was just receiving a title. However, with the title comes the power that makes them never be defeated by normal mages. Since Zagan doesn't say anything, one of them asks what the problem is, and he continues, the first mage Zagan killed was not just any mage. And after killing him, he stole his knowledge. He, a mere novice, was able to memorize a spell scene only. Zagan is even capable of creating his own spells. An abominable ability, because if Zagan wanted to plunder someone, no one could stop him. If he wanted to kill, no one would survive. A truly tyrannical power, and fitting for a demon king. But then Zagan says that if this is from them right there. However, this only makes them laugh, and yet they agree. He could do that, but he should be careful because he has more to lose than to gain by stealing from them. The vengeance of demon kings goes beyond mere destruction. Everything related, be it people, belongings, his name, and even his existence, would be erased. Zagan laughs, and realizes that he either reaches the top or rots. He's already on a one-way street. But what kind of world would he be dragging Nefi into? He wonders. They say they are awaiting his answer. Zagan then says he has something he wants, and his response will depend on getting that thing. And they simply say that whatever it is, it will be his. So, he humbly accepts the position of Demon King. As the seal is placed upon him, they welcome him. Sometime later, Zagan returns home, feeling down. Nefi welcomes him and says she was preparing soup. But noticing Zagan's strange behavior, she asks if something happened. Standing still, he remembers that from the beginning, he had his path laid out. But Nefi managed to show him where the sun shines. He tells her that he has become a demon king. A king among mages, whom others follow. Nefi congratulates him, but it doesn't end there. He also tells her that he has obtained the legacy of his predecessor, the one who bought her. He shows her the key to her collar and says that now he can set her free. And so he does. She was still confused by everything, but without letting her speak, Zagan says that now that he has become a demon king, he no longer needs her, and he tells her to leave. Now, in a corner of the city, Nefi was alone. She wonders why she's in that place, as she was making dinner for her master. But as she looks down where she was sitting, she sees that her old collar was there, broken. And then she remembers. She was discarded by Zagan. And then she begins to remember everything he had said. About giving her a room, eating together, and everything, that despite saying he needed her, in the end, he did this. But Nefi notices that even after all that, she still can't cry. A young woman finds her, specifically the Holy Knight. She soon realizes that this is the one who was with Zagan, and Nefi also remembers her. Getting up, Nefi asks if she came there to kill her. And even though the girl says she doesn't want trouble, Nefi insists that she can decapitate her if she wants. She insists and says that she is a disciple of a mage, so, as a holy knight, she should do that. And hearing all that commotion, people approach. And knowing Nefi, they think the knight was trying to harm her. Nefi keeps asking her to execute her. But the girl says it's not like she's a ruthless killer. Even the angel from that clothing store appears, and thinks the knight was trying to do harm to Nefi. She tries to explain, but everyone is against her. They even call her a monster. And only then Nefi says that the girl didn't do anything to her. This shocks everyone. The pressure was so great that the knight burst into tears, saying she had said she hadn't done anything, that she only saw a distressed girl and got worried. After a while, now, The knight apologizes for her earlier behavior, but no one said anything. The angel asks if she doesn't have anything with Nefi after all, but she asks how many times she'll have to repeat. Nefi interrupts her, saying that she indeed didn't do anything before, and that the one who hurt her master was someone else, who has already learned their lesson. The angel asks what her role in the knights would then be. She says she is the maiden of the Holy Sword, one of the 12 captains. But Nefi asks if she said anything untrue. This makes her sad again, and Nefi wonders if she would be shy, as she seems so brave in service. The waitress arrives and serves a meal, but Nefi says she can't accept it because she doesn't have money. However, the angel says it's just a courtesy from her. While the other two argue in the background, Nefi notices that this was the same meal she was preparing for her master, what finally makes her cry. The two girls don't understand anything, and Nefi bursts into tears. The angel pulls her close and says they can cry on her shoulder. Moments later, Nefi explains to them what happened. The knight then says she thought Zagan was someone worthy, but in the end, he just used her. Hearing this, Nefi says her master is not that kind of person. And even though she said she wasn't angry at her for saying that, Nefi's expressionless face said otherwise. The angel asks if she noticed a change in Zagan's behavior, and she soon remembers that he had said he became a demon king, and tells this to the girls. The angel comments that they are the big shots among mages, and that this city was also controlled by a demon king, and he did a good job establishing order, but he ended up dying. The knight says that after his death, a series of abductions of young girls began. However, the angel says that the church has been charging an absurd fee, which they say is a ransom fee. However, Nefi says that this knight is not the one who is charging, so she shouldn't blame her. She thanks Nefi and says she is really kind, and then she begins to explain that if a new demon king has emerged, the church will surely try everything to kill him before he accumulates power. Besides that, even other mages will try this in search of his position. Nefi begins to reflect on this and wonders if that was the reason for him to send her away. The knight then asks Nefi if she knows if Zagan has ever been accompanied by several mages and carried out abductions or sacrifice rituals, but Nefi replies that no, that Zagan never stopped having a strange concern for the weak. This only confirms the knight's doubts, that in her fight against him, Zagan had taken it easy on her because she was a woman. Prodding her, the angel asks if that's the face of a love-struck knight, but she denies it, and she adds that the first time she saw him, he already seemed like someone who needed help. This surprises Nefi, as she didn't think anyone else understood Zagan like she did. Feeling a little jealous and, at the same time, content. Getting up, Nefi says she's going back to her master. They ask if everything is really okay, but she says that even though her master is strong, no one is okay when they're left alone. And she affirms that she wants to become someone Zagan can depend on. They are surprised, but they agree. The angel says that now that the two girls have composed themselves, it was time to end the night. Nefi then asks why she's being so kind, but Manuela just says it's because they're friends. Nefi is confused, saying no one has said anything like that to her before. Delighted, Manuela hugs her. Knight asks if she can also consider them friends. Manuela says of course they're friends, and hugs her with her wings. Some holy knights arrive calling for Lady Chastel. Shadows appear around Nefi and Chastel, and they are sucked in. Only Manuela manages to escape. However, without caring, the shadow says it's Zagan, and if they want to save those girls, they should come to his castle, and then disappears with the girls. Moments later, Zagan is looking at the moon, near his castle, and on the ground, there were some holy knights, those who were caught in a trap. Zagan quickly remembers that trap was set by Nefi when they were training, but he clenches his fists and affirms to himself that it's fine. The people from the neighboring town really like Nefi, so they should welcome her without any problems. But as he was leaving the scene, one of the fallen men grabs his leg and begs him to spare Lady Chastel. Unlike them, she believes he is innocent. However, he doesn't even remember who Chastel is. Suddenly, Manuela also arrives at the scene, even landing on the head of the man on the ground. Finding all of this annoying, Zagan was about to send them all flying, but Manuela warns that Nefi and Chastel have been abducted. He wonders if he tried to distance himself from Nefi too late. Manuela begs him to save them, and it's obvious he won't ignore this situation. However, if he helps her publicly, Nefi will be recognized as his ally, and she won't even be able to escape from the church. But noticing Zagan's hesitation, Manuela asks why he treated her so kindly all this time. Those words hurt more than any attack Zagan had ever received up to that day. And now he finds himself thinking that, even after saying those horrible things to her, she was still going to come back, and it's revealed that he knows very well why, even without seeing her expressive ears. He knows Neffy has feelings for him, someone he considers himself despicable. He thanks Manuela and says that his thoughts are clear now. Mages are people who only think of their own benefit, so Neffy is his, and anyone who dares to touch her will be annihilated. If something threatens her, he just has to protect her, using all his authority and power as a demon king. That said, he summons a magic circle and asks if Manuela isn't going with him to save Neffy, and he says he will, because she's his friend. And not wanting to be left behind, the knights from before cling to Zagan, saying they also want to rescue Chastel. Manuela says that the one who kidnapped the girls used a shadow. However, Zagan already knew very well who the culprit was. Now, inside a cave, Neffy and Chastel were trapped. Chastel, who woke up first, asks if Neffy is hurt. Neffy soon realizes that the collar and shackles were suppressing her magic, even though they are not as complex as the ones she used at the beginning. She tries to use her mysticism power, but she can't. Noticing they have awakened, the one responsible for all this approaches. Realizing who he is, Neffy asks if he was not a friend of her master. Barbaros reveals to be the one responsible for all this. He says he is surprised that someone thinks mages are friends. Then, he pulls Neffy by the collar and asks if she knows who was the first mage Zagan killed. Barbaros says the first was her master. However, this is not a quest for vengeance for his teacher's death. And if Zagan hadn't killed him, he would have done it himself. The real problem was that the castle, the money he used to buy Neffy, and even the knowledge should have been Barbaros's. But after killing his teacher, Zagan got everything. And since he wouldn't just give everything away without doing anything, he first tried to incite the church, sending them against Zagan. Chastel quickly realizes that the one behind the abductions was in front of them, but Barbaros just asks if she only realized it now. Chastel gets furious and asks if all the horrible things he did were just to incriminate Zagan. However, he says no. The one who started all this was the one who initially attacked, wanting to rip his face off. He just took advantage to do something bigger. Now, with the magical power of a white-haired elf, he will be able to open the gate. And he will prove to the Demon Kings that he is worthy of occupying the vacant place. Neffy remarks that this is probably futile. Barbaros asks if she thinks he won't kill her, or if she expects Zagan to come for her, but Neffy says she didn't mean that. Instead, she means that the position of Demon King that was missing has already been given to Zagan. Barbaros calls it a lie. In addition to Zagan stealing his teacher's legacy, he also took the Demon King's throne. Furious, Barbaros goes to Neffy and pulls her by the chain, saying that if he is a Demon King now, he just has to strip him of his title. And if he gets what he plans, it won't matter if he is a Demon King or not. Chastel screams at him and asks him to use her instead of Neffy. But Barbaros says that for this ritual, the best tool is needed. Being called a tool brings back memories of something she used to be, but thanks to Zagan, she is no longer. Thus, she begins to react against Barbaros because she wants to return to Zagan. She wants to cook for him, make another lap pillow. Impatiently, Barbaros pulls her forcefully and makes her fall, injuring herself. However, she gets up and says it didn't hurt, and she adds that she belongs to Zagan, and he has no right to touch her. Barbaros was about to do something about it. However, an explosion occurs right beside him. Zagan arrived, destroying the cave. And then he greets Barbaros. He asks when he found out it was him, and Zagan replies that he started to suspect when that face-stealing mage appeared in his garden. That someone so pathetic could never break his barrier and enter his garden. Moreover, after that incident and the one with the Holy Knights, Barbaros always visited him as if to check something. And he adds, saying it would be strange not to suspect him. But putting that aside, Zagan quickly notices that he hurt Neffy, and he jumps towards her. Without giving her time to react, Zagan starts by wanting to cut off her arms, then her legs, and there he leaves to check on Neffy. He releases her chains and asks if it hurt her. She says it hurt, but that he was again trying to hurt himself too, and that would be worse than that. And she adds, saying she could never be at peace knowing he was hurting himself, and asks him not to shut himself off again. However, right behind them, Barbaros was healing, and then he was about to launch an attack. Neffy panics, but Zagan tells her not to worry because nothing will happen. And so, the circles summoned by Barbaros disappear. He doesn't understand, and tries to summon more, but nothing works. Neffy also doesn't understand anything, and asks what was happening. Zagan asks her if she remembers when he talked about the most powerful magic of all, the one of placing magic circles not only outside, but inside. He explains that if you do this by copying the same circle as the opponent's, and then adding your own extra circles, the magic of your enemy becomes yours. The first time he did this was when he drew with blood on his hand, the same magic as the one who kidnapped him. and he took advantage when the mage came towards him to kill him, to repel his magic with the same magic. After that, he started to research more and improve this magic. Desperate, Barbaros invokes his most destructive magic, but it is quickly destroyed. Even though it was the first time he saw it, Zagan managed to copy it in the blink of an eye. An imposing magic, an abominable ability. Zagan then shows the circles he copied from Barbaros, and reveals that he, for now, can only use them as bodily reinforcement. But he will continue to develop it, and he adds, saying that he finally gained a title. His title is the Mage Killer, and he delivers a tremendous punch to Barbaros that destroys everything around. On the ground, barely able to speak, Barbaros realizes, if a mage like him raises his fists, not even a demon king can stop him. Zagan approaches, and now Barbaros asks him to wait, and admits that he lost, and that he will never show up there again, that he will even give him his research. Already close enough, he asks if they are not friends, but Zagan raises his fists, and asks if there is such a thing among mages, and he delivers another punch to Barbaros. However, this one missed. Zagan smiles, and tells him not to be so scared. Barbaros doesn't understand, and Zagan says he has no reason to kill him. He asks if he was feeling sorry for him, but Zagan says he can afford that luxury. Furious, Barbaros says he will definitely kill him if he lets him live. But Zagan says that if he tries again, he just has to subdue him again. Besides, he will be different from the other demon kings. He will do as he pleases. If Nefi wants to live under the sun, then he just needs to order everything to happen. And he says that if he doesn't like something, he just has to show his strength. Barbaros gives up arguing, and calls him arrogant. But what would a demon king be without his arrogance? The girls were safe and everything seemed fine, until another magic circle appears on the ground. Barbaros says that wasn't him. At that, Zagan wonders if he interfered with something when he hit the ground with his punch. Feeling a bizarre mana, Zagan just asks what the hell Barbaros was trying to do there, and he reveals that he was trying to summon a real demon. There is a theory that magical inscriptions were left by gods and demons from ancient times, and Zagan just wondered if they could summon those true demons. A huge shadow is summoned, and everyone is terrified. It looks at that, and that looks back. At that moment, Zagan noticed humans are no match for that thing. The thing moves its arm, and Zagan thought it would be his end. However, it just bows and asks what would be the orders of its master. No one understands, but Zagan soon realizes that thing didn't bow to him, but to the Demon King's seal. He just wonders, what the hell did he end up inheriting? With Chastel unconscious in his arms, the knights complain that they will let them go only because they are busy, and they leave. Manuela also approaches and tells them to talk properly later. Now, he needed to take care of Barbaros. He says he has nothing else to do, especially after witnessing that thing, which Zagan sent back to where it came from. Before leaving, Barbaros confirms if he needs to bring a drink as an apology, and Zagan says it has to be a top-tier one. And then he leaves. Now, Nefi and Zagan were alone. Zagan wonders what he should say, but before saying anything, Nefi calls him, and says she wants to be by his side. He asks if she is sure, but she says yes. At that, he realizes Nefi has become stronger. Zagan agrees with her staying, but says it won't be like before. He doesn't want her to call him master anymore, but by his name. He doesn't want her as a slave or as an apprentice. This is the kind of relationship he wants. Both their hearts start beating rapidly, and Zagan tries to say that he loves her, but he can't. So he grabs her hand and says that Nefi is his forever, for all his life, even after death. Depressed, he wonders why he can't just say that he loves her, but, understanding, Nefi smiles and says yes. Suddenly, she takes the necklace she had at the beginning, and asks if he couldn't put it back on her. Zagan says that it's not right because it's from a slave. However, she says that it was what connected them first, so it's okay. He finds it a little unsettling to consider it an engagement ring, but okay. And then Nefi asks, a relationship that is not of a slave, a servant, or an apprentice would be of what? He remains silent, in shock. And now he reflects on how he, a demon king who took an elf slave as a wife, will demonstrate his love for her. Elsewhere, a new figure appears and is behind the new demon king. Days later, now in his castle, Zagan researches about this seal he inherited. A seal that made a real demon bow. He searched in Markosia's legacies, from whom he inherited the seal, but found nothing. Suddenly, Nefi entered the library. She tried to play the Guess Who game, but couldn't reach. Embarrassed, now she wonders what to do, and Zagan asks himself the same question. She explains that she tried to surprise him, because lately he seemed tired while researching. Inside, he found it all cute and wanted to hug her right there, but outwardly, he acted the same way as always. And then Nefi says she prepared lunch. Looking at all that, Zagan is surprised, because her repertoire of recipes keeps growing. They try it, and Zagan says he never thought a meal could be so good. Neffy says he always says that, and that she also made pudding. Manuela taught her how to make it, but Zagan quickly asks if she didn't teach her anything strange, and Neffy reveals that she also made her try on some clothes that made her feel embarrassed, but that only she saw. Neffy then brings the pudding, and upon trying it, he finds it wonderful. However, his peace is soon interrupted, as someone invaded his territory. Zagan warns that they have a guest, but he ignores it and keeps eating. However, this one is different. He not only avoided the traps but also broke the gate. He enters the kitchen and asks if he is Zagan, the Demon King. And Zagan briefly remembers seeing him at the auction. The creature says he will defeat him and take his power, but Zagan just says he was eating and he should wait. The invader is confused, and Neffy tells Zagan that he could prepare another dish, but impatient, the invader tells him not to play the fool and attacks. Zagan grabs his hand, but he was already preparing another attack. Furious, Zagan says he warned him and then strikes him. Neffy notices something strange and walks over there. Zagan quickly warns that this kind of annoyance will be frequent. But Neffy says the intruder was actually a child. Upon seeing that it was just a child, Zagan panics. At that moment, he even asks Neffy to bring a cold remedy for the girl, and Neffy asks him to calm down. Complaining about how troublesome this intruder is, Zagan puts her on his back and takes her. Seeing this, Neffy says he is really kind. Zagan takes her to a guest room, and as soon as she wakes up and sees Zagan, she attacks him. However, he defends himself and simply says she should thank Neffy for that. Then, he asks her why she came and attacked him. She decides to be honest and says she did it because she wants power since she is weak. Zagan says he understands but asks why attack him, of all people. And that's because he is the new Demon Lord, and his title is the Mage Killer, so she thought he would be weak against other things. And indeed, he cannot nullify the abilities of other races, as they are not magic. And remembering the fight they had, he quickly realizes something. So he asks if she is a dragon. Noticing her reaction, he realizes he hit the mark, but he doesn't understand why she would attack him in search of power, since just by living, she would become stronger than any human. This behavior reminded him when he was caught stealing something. She thought she had found an easy target and got caught. But as she came there to challenge him, even if he were a demon lord, Zagan says he will punish her. Thus, he orders her to assist Neffy for a week. Both girls are surprised. Zagan's idea is to make her learn right from wrong while helping Neffy, but she doesn't understand. She asks if he then doesn't intend to eat her. She heard that people who consume dragon meat and blood can become much stronger. Zagan says that legend does exist, however, he says he wouldn't do that because it would leave a bad taste in his mouth. She cries and he doesn't understand. At that moment, he wonders what the older kids from that slum would do, and then he realizes what he should do. So, he asks Neffy to serve something for the girl. She looks at it with apprehension and asks what it is. Zagan says it's called charity, and he warns that he hates people who waste food, especially if it's made by Neffy. That way, she quickly eats, surprising them because it was delicious. Neffy is flattered, and the girl finishes eating everything. Finished there, Zagan says he's going back to work. The girl tells him to wait and asks if he doesn't think she could attack Neffy and flee afterwards. He says she can do as she pleases and, before leaving, tells her not to confuse things, and warns that Neffy is much stronger than her. She is shocked, and he leaves. On the way, he now thinks it was good to prepare a guest room, in case Neffy's friends wanted to visit, and he wonders how Chastel is after that incident. And in the cathedral, the one who seems to be a bishop asks if she doesn't intend to change her mind. She replies no, and so he declares that her authority as captain of the Holy Knights will be suspended indefinitely. The knights around were outraged, but Chastel asked them to stop. At this moment, she realizes that her resignation is a bigger problem than the emergence of a new demon lord. In other words, eliminating Zagan would only be a show of strength by the church. Now she realizes all of this and decides not to swing her sword following orders anymore. She will follow Zagan's example and do what she wants. And noticing that she seemed not to be bothered by this decision, Grace, the bishop, says he will try to protect her. However, he can only do something about politics. And he warns that the bearer of the Holy Sword, the terrible Raphael, is on his way there. Knowing who he is, she is frightened. Grace says that man is a cruel person, and says he doesn't know why he's coming there. Chastel tries to think of a reason for this, and thinks it could only be a purification. Back at Zagan's castle, he was spying on Neffy with the troublesome intruder. He said he was going to work and leave them, but ended up getting very worried. The girl asks if it was Neffy who prepared that soup. Neffy replies yes, and she says again that it was very good. Thus, she says Neffy can call her fall. Nefi agrees and asks if Fall happens to be afraid of Zagan. She says his face isn't scary, and if his mouth were wider, he could even be called handsome. But she reveals what is actually scary would be his power. Nefi says Zagan doesn't use his power arbitrarily, however, deep down, he wonders if he doesn't indeed. Fall asks why Nefi is with him, and she says Zagan bought her as a slave, but he doesn't treat her like one, and that's where she belongs. With that said, Nefi asks if she also has a place like that, but Fall says she doesn't, so several days passed. Fall lowered her guard a bit and worked obediently without complaints. As for his research on the seal, he found nothing. All that's left is to investigate Markosia's castle once again. Suddenly, Fall appears and announces that dinner is ready. Zagan says he was coming and quickly turns back. Fall asks if he doesn't think she might attack him from behind like that. This reminds him of the fight against Barbaros. He smiles and says he had a similar conversation with someone else. So he responds the same way, if you want to challenge him, you can, but be prepared for the consequences. In her case, her work period will be extended. After that, they all go to dinner. Nefi asks Fall if it's good, and she says yes. Then, Fall calls Zagan and apologizes for interrupting his meal the first time they met. He accepts the apology and notes that she must be doing well now. Then Zagan calls Nefi and says he will take Fall with him to Markosia's castle. Fall asks what he's thinking, and that doing so is the same as giving her the knowledge of the late lord, and that even now, he doesn't mind her entering his library. Hearing this, Zagan just says he doesn't care, and that, moreover, to him, knowledge is something to be stolen, just as he did with the former resident of that castle. Fall says she doesn't understand, and then he says that, even if she lives like a dragon or is as skilled as a wizard, to him, she is just a child. This makes Fall cry. Confused, he goes to her, pets her head, and asks her not to cry, and asks her to just go back to eating. Done crying, he says following a demon lord must be a bad thing for her, and that regardless of her reason, Fall is brave. With that resolved, Fall tells him to stop calling her you, and tells him he can also call her Fall. After the cute moment ends, they put her to bed. Nefi comments that now she must be more comfortable with him, and reveals that when she first saw him, she felt the same. Nervous, Zagan ends up saying it's because she is his, and realizes he called her thing again. And seeing that Fall fell asleep holding the spoon, he takes it from her hands. And with that, she holds his fingers instead. And still asleep, she calls him daddy. Zagan wonders if she was dreaming about her parents. And suddenly, Nefi comments that this way, it seems like they have a daughter. They both get embarrassed, and Nefi explains she didn't mean that, and he says he understood. Without saying anything else, Nefi grabs his shirt sleeve, and they hold hands. And so, Zagan wonders if they will ever achieve that happiness. The next day, they went to Manuela, and she made a costume for Fall. She liked it so much she wanted to take it home. They came there before going to Markosia's castle because they wanted to buy new clothes, but now he wonders if it was a good idea to go to Manuela's shop. Nefi says it was indeed a great choice, and points to Fall, who was happily twirling in the outfit. She calls Zagan and thanks him. He feels awkward, and she grabs his hand and Nefi's too. Zagan now feels something different about his feelings for Nefi, and he wonders if this is the desire to protect. Now he thinks that if Barbaros knew about this, he would certainly question his sanity. Walking alone through the city was Chastel. They took away her holy sword, and she couldn't even walk with her blessed armor. However, her distancing at least delayed the plan to subjugate the demon lord. But even now, she wanted to do more. Not because she wanted to stay among them, but because she wanted to support them so they could live a life of peace. That way, they would at least remember her from time to time. Still lost in her fantasies, she sees their figures in the distance. When she gets closer and sees better, she is startled and asks if they already had a daughter. Both are caught off guard and embarrassed, but Zagan quickly tells her not to say such embarrassing things. Fall asks who she would be, and he was about to introduce her, however, and asks who she is. Chastel bursts into tears, and Nefi reminds him who she is. So, he introduces Chastel as Nefi's friend. Suddenly, some knights find Chastel and recognize Zagan, who just mocks them. But he soon realized that Fall was about to attack them, and tells her not to. She asks why, and he says there are acquaintances of Nefi there, so there would be casualties. So, the knights take Chastel away. Nefi asks if she'll be okay, and Zagan says probably yes, as she's popular enough. And then he calls Fall and asks if they did something to her. She asks if there should be reasons not to like holy knights, and he says no. Turning around, he just hopes this doesn't become a problem later. Arriving at Markosia's castle, Fall is surprised to find such a large construction underground, and Zagan says it became like this due to an accident. Looking at all that, she feels a familiar feeling and tells Zagan that dragons used to live there in the past. This is news to him, and she explains that the structure of the cave is similar to where she lived, and even the smell of magic is the same. They enter, and only silence and darkness fill the place. Neffy was scared, so she held Zagan's hand along the way. They find a pillar with something that looked like a golem or a chimera. He says it must have stopped working after Markosia's death, but they must be careful not to touch it. And they delve deeper into the castle. Fall shows a magic circle she found, saying it's the formula of a dragon. For her discovery, Zagan praises her and pets her head. Then he asks what that means. She says it's a door, and he asks her to open it. As Fall opens it, Zagan notices that Neffy seems restless. She seemed to want something, and he wonders if it's head scratches, since he did it to Fall before. He calls her and tells her not to move. Then he starts rubbing her head frantically, and she wiggles her ears happily. However, they forgot that Fall was there, and after noticing her, she says she already opened the door. They follow the path until they reach a giant door. This one reveals Markosia's immense library. Zagan asks them to gather all the books that mention demons or have the seal of the Demon Lord. Fall seemed a little down, so Zagan says that, since Markosia's lived for a millennium, he hopes to live that long too. Fall asks if they could always be together, and he says he won't stop her from going wherever she wants. She hugs him and says she's okay with him. Suddenly she notices a strange book, and Zagan asks to see it. It was the Book of the 12 Holy Swords, and it had the seal of the Demon Lord. He notices that the scriptures are similar, and soon realizes that if he investigates the Holy Swords, he can discover more about the Demon Lord's seal. But that's it, folks. Let's stop here, and if you liked the video, subscribe to our channel to support and leave a like. See you next time.